basically the story. Sorry, it's basically the story you want to tell, and you want to own that story. You want to be the one that controls the narrative. Otherwise, yeah, we would leave it to our opponents, for example, the fossil fuel industry, and we cannot let that happen. So you see here a proverb from the Hopi Indians where it says, the one that tells the story rules the world. So it's very important to get your story straight, and we use it also to improve the strategic and organizational value of our communications, to align all our communication efforts, because we usually are networks and have different different communication efforts, different stresses. And the narrative intelligence is basically that ability to move people and ideas towards a shared future. So really create a vision and getting everybody to focused on reaching that vision. So here I share an example of a possible narrative structure that you could follow. It starts with a context. Basically, you lay down the larger problem, the dilemma, and then the next paragraph, you would be looking for a resolution. You would also bring up surprises, further complications. You know, narratives is telling the truth, but in a very indirect way. So there's a lot of saying things in a mysterious way. So the third paragraph could be a place where you talk about the greater magnitude of the crisis, and you lay down the critical choice, you know, the ultimate place where people have to really make a choice between a better future or you know, a future marred by climate change and other crises. And the last stand is basically the resolution. It's a place where you give people hope and that whole idea of shared vision. Next slide, please. Okay, so sorry, here the slide is not very clear, but we can go over it together. So this is an example of how we do the structure. So in the dilemma, in the first paragraph, it's where we say, you know, that scientists agree we're facing catastrophic climate change. It's exasperating inequality. It's spraying hardest on vulnerable people. It affects livelihoods, ecosystems, lives, and future generations. And we must limit global temperatures to 1.5. The next paragraph, where we talk about rising state of jeopardy and quest for resolution, it's where we talk about the solution side, and that the transition to renewable energy has started and is ongoing, and it's the best way forward for health, for investments, clean investments, new business, jobs. But we also talk about, you know, that rising state of jeopardy, the urgency that people are suffering, that, you know, impacts will only intensify. We risk losing entire nations. And yeah, the situation can easily spin out of control if we don't act now. Then we talk about, you know, further complications, where we say that the system is broken, that the fossil fuel industry is investing everything to stop the transition to renewables and to promote false solutions. So if we don't break that impasse, it will be too late for those that are at risk. So we slowly go into the positive story, you know, that people are taking things in their hands. They're installing renewable energy sources, building more resilient societies, developing new business. Yeah, and they are taking the money out of the banks that subsidize fossil fuels. In the last strand, the resolution, we give people, you know, that sense of power, that you know, that sense of control, that you are part of the revolution. People are building power. They know they can do it. We are creating the world we want. We are together in this. And yeah, we need to make governments listen and choose whether they are on the right or the wrong side of history. So next slide, please. these are a few tips on what to do and what not to do in building a narrative. So we definitely have to be clear, free of any jargon and technical language. It should be concise, so you have more control. It should be consistent, so don't be afraid of repeating the message because it may be the first time it falls on the ears of an audience. So yeah, be consistent and appeal to emotions, humanize the story as much as possible, because you need people to connect to your narrative. It is as real as people's relationship to it. And yeah, avoid starting with data, especially when you are working with renewables. There's a lot of data, but the story is dead on arrival if you use data. And deepen authenticity and rapport. That means use as much as possible real people, personal stories. Communicating the connections between renewable energy and broader concerns. So because we talk a lot about renewable energies, it should be very much related to people's concerns, like their concerns with jobs, with pollution, breathing clean air, their health. So this is why we create that rationale, and this is how we shift people's thinking about energy. Next slide, please. So you want to identify the problem, you want to identify the solution, so the why, the what, the evidence that supports your narrative. You want to identify who is speaking and who they are speaking to. Next slide, please. So here we take an example of the narrative, one example, one paragraph of the narrative we just saw. And that paragraph where we say, if we don't break the political impacts quickly, solutions could come too late for many at risk now. Those driving the great transition have seen massive change in the world before, witnessing previous generations overcoming seemingly impossible odds to remove the biggest injustices. They know a better world is within reach and the time for change is now, and they know it's their generation's task to turn the tide on climate change. That is why people are increasingly taking things into their own hands now by installing renewable energy sources, building more resilient and prosperous communities, developing new and sustainable business models, and taking their money out of banks which support dirty energy projects. And here you would have already identified your problem, the need for system change, the anti-financialization, for future perspectives, emotional engagement, the faith, the hope, the dirty versus the clean investment, the clean energy support. Your messengers are grassroots communities, the NGOs, faith groups, social justice voices, youth voices, PR agencies and businesses, and your audience could be members of the media, policymakers and regulators and investors. So really, as you see here, the narrative is the first building block of any communication plan, where a lot of the elements of it are already identified. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hala. And I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mickey, calling out of Manila in the Philippines, communications officer for digital and social media with CAN International. And just to give you a quick introduction to social media, it's becoming more and more a political battlefield all around the world. Elections and policy are won or lost through social media these days. And in fact, one of the rising concerns about social media as a new platform for politics is misinformation and fake news. In some of our countries, it's up to, for example, in Brazil, up to 84% of people think it's a major concern. In the Philippines, it's about 57%, more than half of the people. In Malaysia, you have 62%, so on and so forth. And in fact, in 2019, one of the biggest climate stories that were published was fake news. If you see here on the table on the right, you would see CNN story being the top news, but the second one is a fake news from naturalnews.com. And that was the second biggest engagement of all the different news articles were published throughout the year. And in terms of social media usage around the world, um, for the first time in history in 2020, more than half of the world's population is on social media. 53.6% currently, or 4.2 billion, are now on social media, and that's continuously increasing by the millions every year. And this is different, obviously, in different parts of the world. We see in Europe, for example, and North America and parts of Asia, way more than half, or even up to 75% of the population is on social media. But this is still growing in many regions around the world, say in the Caribbean and Africa, perhaps in parts of Middle East as well, and in South Asia. And more people use social media as a major part of their daily lives. Here you see that on average, people spend about 2 to 4%, 2 to 4 hours rather, on social media used through their phones. And each market or region has a different predominant social media that they use. It can be different per country, so that's something to consider in your regions as well. It could be different per region or per country. It really depends. And there are many different reasons why people use social media. The primary one is just to stay up to date or updated with news and current events. So that's why it's very important to, share your press release, etc. But the second biggest one is apparently just finding funny or entertaining content, and filling up spare time, getting in touch with friends. So if you are able to deliver news and current events about climate change or something, or the advocacy, but also find funny or entertaining content, then you are able to hit two birds with one stone. And how can we do that? We have to be a bit more creative, through memes like this, Vin Diesel, Vin Renewable Energy, or Solar Power, Lord's album, or some cartoon caricature like the ones on the right. And then that's how you increase engagement, because that's appealing to why people use social media. And per platform, there's also different reasons why people use social media. So you have to tailor that to what kind of social media platform you're taking advantage of, or where your audience is. Is it Instagram, Facebook? Are videos more effective? Research shows that reels or videos are more effective than just text. Some are a bit more professional, like if you want to grow your audience on LinkedIn. Some are more funny or entertaining content, like on TikTok, etc. So now with CAN's strategy, we are pursuing a more mobile first strategy, because we've seen in our analytics that over 70% of our content online during our peak times of the year, like COP or SPs, are viewed through mobile devices. So that's why it's very important to be able to develop social media campaigns for different goals and objectives, for different moments, and it should include the why. When you develop a social media campaign, start with the goal or the objective of the campaign and what a campaign win looks like. Say, for example, at the SBs, you would have different objectives for loss and damage, for adaptation. Make that clear. And now we want to understand or identify who we want to speak to. Who are your target demographics of decision makers? Say the negotiators at the NFCCC process, country negotiators, who are also the amplifiers, who will be your sounding board, who will be your megaphone for amplifying that kind of message. Who can you target as influencers who are outside of that typical climate bubble or climate policy space? What are the key messages, and what kind of content do you want to create to push for that specific objective, and that will work to increase engagement with that specific target audience? In terms of when do you schedule the posts? What are the best time of the day, best day in the week, and time zones? And you can see that through social media analytics and your history for engagement, what works, what doesn't, which we'll discuss in a bit as well. And how is the most effective medium to kind of move the needle of decision makers and increase your critical mass, or achieve your critical mass to influence the decision making. Now, in terms of engagement, we have a three-pronged strategy. We have content that are diversified, right? Of course, we amplify content from our network, from you guys, from the different regions and our organizations, to just raise awareness on more, um, a broader net. So you have a larger audience and you amplify stories, you try to influence sentiment. This could be from reports, from PRs, from more general content. And then the second layer is trying to tell a story of that specific issue, say in terms of jobs and renewable energy, health impacts of dirty fossil fuels, using different angles. So this is a bit more, putting a human face, like Hala described earlier when you're trying to do storytelling, to create public pressure that these people who actually put you in positions through elections are having these discontent or dissatisfaction with the policy and want this specific policy. Now we get to be a bit more specific when we do targeted messaging. So these are more specific policy or political demands that are targeted towards specific decision makers. So after you've told that story, sorry for the dogs, you try to put forward a specific policy demand, like at least 55% net emission reductions or net zero by 2050, by 2030, etc. These are just some of the examples that we've put out from the CAN Twitter account. So for example, impact stories from Bangladesh, from Siberia, policy positions from during the 20 demands on the 10 demands on just reboot, the SB 2021, the virtual SBs just this year, demands for G7 countries, etc. And here are some of the tools that we can use that you can also use. And I've separated them from the free ones or very cheap ones, which include all social networking sites. Specifically, if you're using them organically, meaning not paid. Google Suite, the Google Docs, Slides, Sheets, and Drive. We typically send out a social media pack or a comms pack through a Google Docs because you can put in links, download the content. We also use the sheets for the Twitter handles database, for example, during the SBs, so that people can use that to tag them directly. We also put out the Twitter hashtags and the Twitter handles of the relevant target audience. You can also use a free version of Canva, although we now use a paid version because it has a non-profit discount anyway for graphic design and layout. You can also use meme generators online, and it's free to use. We also use MailChimp to do email blasts like the Can monthly newsletter. For the paid ones, you can do social media advertising, which costs per click. There's a cost per click for Google ads or AdSense, for YouTube ads, for Facebook and social media ads. We use tools like Hootsuite, which manages your social media. You can schedule posts depending on the time zones, etc. Other tools like that are Sprout Social, Buffer, Social Pilot, but these are all paid. But you can trial them for about 30 days. We also use Adobe Suite, Photoshop, Premiere Pro to do the graphics, the videos, artwork, and campaign CRMs like New Mode, Action Network, and we also use Trello. So this is an example of Trello, where you can download stuff. This is an example of analyzing, which time of day or which day of the week is it most effective in different platforms. Here is just the kinds of engagement that you want to drive, and lastly, you want to do analytics so you can, what you do not measure or what you cannot manage, what you cannot measure. So through analytics, you can analyze which work and which don't for your target audiences. And here we provide you a copy of an analytics or social media report template that you can use in your organizations. This is just an example of an analytics that we did over COP25, wherein we see that some of the more conflict stories, or there's a bit more conflict as other than putting out more policy related content. We see an increased engagement, say for the time when UNFCCC banned eco during COP25, and we had a Twitter storm about that when there was a plenary action and people were being debadged at COP25. That was also like higher engagement, and especially towards the end when we had a very disappointing result coming out of COP25, and we had actions, and we had Greta Thunberg retweeting stuff, people like really getting into the Twitter storms that day. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Darini, our colleague, who will cover media outreach.
Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining. My name is Dharini, and I also work in the CAN Secretariat in the communications team, and I'm based in Bangalore in India. So I'm going to speak a little bit about how to integrate a media strategy into the overall communication strategy. So Hala has spoken a bit about building a narrative and the importance of framing a story, and Mickey has spoken about the social media elements. As we know, the media is a very integral part to carrying the messages that we want to actually disseminate, to build our story, and to get the word out. We also are seeing a lot of scrutiny of media articles recently, because it is very important that the media, particularly on climate change and the importance of renewables, is actually carrying more stories, doing more journalism around the climate crisis. And so our work around this also becomes quite important. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, I'm sure everyone knows this, but why and how we will cover it. Like, I will just go through why and how we do a media outreach. And I will look at two practical examples. So one is on planning and doing an online press briefing. So this is something that we have done at CAN quite a lot. And then drafting, pitching, and placing an opinion piece, which can actually help build, our profile, the profile of your organization, but also add to the debate and the discussion to influence, the narrative that we would like to become the dominant narrative. And then we will look at one other specific example, which is on our rapid response mechanism, which is, again, sort of like how to coordinate the collection of quotes from different organizations virtually, when we work virtually around important summits, and how to do that in real time to kind of make an impact, and also build, our presence on social media. Next slide. So essentially, why and how should we focus on the media? First of all, mainstream media is still a very dominant part of how people consume their news and information in many parts of the world. So Mickey has spoken about, flagging how fake news is making making news more unreliable and like taking a hold in different parts of the world. And so the importance of mainstream media, because of the reputation, the credibility, their outreach becomes more and more important in sort of countering this rise of fake news on social media. And as I mentioned before, it is an important way to frame a story. It's an important way to reach out to varied audiences, depending on the editorial slant of any media. Of course, some media will carry, more stories on climate change because they have more of an editorial policy around that. But there are other media which actually can be quite climate skeptic, can actually be indulging in climate denialism. But I think our message should be one that actually tries to reach a broad audience on both sides, because that is only how we will actually get more people to understand the importance of addressing the climate crisis and the importance of making renewables a big part of this decade's attempt to stop the worst of the climate crisis. Also, I think it's important to know that mainstream media nowadays, it's not just about print. I think print media is kind of, on its last legs in many parts of the world. Most people do not buy a newspaper every day. Many young people, actually, studies have shown, consume news online. But many media organizations actually will have a visual element to many of their stories. So they will do like a short video. They will have a social media package around their print stories. So that is one way also to kind of reach out to different audiences, and not just, if it's print media, only look at a newspaper, for instance, or a magazine. And as I mentioned before, using the media strategically and systematically can help build a dominant narrative. Now, a dominant narrative is one that actually becomes more and more accepted and gains, you know, a higher profile over time. So just for instance, if we speak about the issue of loss and damage, for instance, that may have been a sort of fringe issue, you know, earlier, which is loss and damage is the irreversible impacts of the climate crisis. But as we have more and more media, for instance, covering issues around loss and damage, it kind of becomes the dominant narrative. And that's one way of making it the dominant narrative, through the media. And the same would go with other examples like renewables, and linking that to energy security and energy independence. The media outreach is also important because it is it's a very tangible way to show your outcome. Obviously, the theory of change is not very simple in that, you know, placing one op-ed doesn't mean that immediately you're going to have a change of minds and behavior, but it is one way of showing that your you know, your work is making an impact, because like I mentioned, many of these mainstream media will have editorial standards, they'll have certain guidelines, so they won't obviously post anything that they get. So, you know, that makes your message more credible and more reliable. And therefore, having, you know, media articles is an important way to show that your work is making an impact. Next slide, please. So yeah, just on planning and executing an online press briefing. So actually, I just want to preface this by saying that CAN has a media training toolkit that we've developed over the years, which we actually use around the COP. And this is something that I won't get into here because we don't have the time to get into like the step-by-step process. But if you would like that, we will share it along with the material that we have. And there you will find exactly how to organize an online press briefing. But here I'll just give a glimpse of how we would, you know, plan it in very sort of top line steps. So the first thing is, you know, obviously you want to pick a theme for your press briefing. So if your theme is around a renewable energy project, for instance, that will be the focus of your messaging. That will be the focus of you know, how you would want the journalists who are attending to their biggest takeaway from your press briefing. And obviously we'll start with identifying speakers, and this is important because the messengers of any message are as important as the actual message in itself. So ideally you want a mix of you know, new people who are not very familiar with the media, but also more seasoned speakers who can take more challenging questions. You also want to make sure that there is regional balance. If it is an international press briefing, you want to make sure that it has gender balance, that you are accommodating different voices and perspectives. And this is very important to, you know, to make sure that you deliver a strong press briefing. And then it's important to prep with all the speakers and obviously rehearse, because everything that goes on the media is on the record. And then, of course, there is the logistical aspects of inviting a media, you know, making a list of journalists who will attend, who cover these stories. And then while the press briefing is going on, one way of actually amplifying the messages is through live tweeting some of the sound bites that the speakers are making. And this, again, just makes the press briefing more accessible to a larger audience. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the next point is on drafting, pitching, and placing an opinion piece. Again, a step-by-step guide is available in our media training package, but essentially, what is important to keep in mind here is that when you place a press briefing, that it is strategic, that it actually ties in with the news cycle. So for instance, if there is, you know, for instance, if you look at the news right now, we're obviously seeing really, really devastating headlines from around the world. I don't know if there's any country that has been spared from the impacts of the climate crisis in these last few weeks. And you know, obviously one way is to highlight why perhaps we need climate finance. You know, at this moment, it is important to make the connection between the crisis that we're facing, but also the solutions. And so, for instance, placing an opinion piece on, say, climate finance ahead of COP26 is an important intervention, and that can actually raise the level of debate and discussion and make those connections between what we're seeing as impacts, but also what we need as solutions. And I think targeting different media to place opinion pieces is important, because there are international mainstream media, then there's regional media, and there's national media. And so it is important to understand what audience you would like to reach. In many cases at CAN, we have co-authored opinion pieces. So we will have, authors from different parts of the world, just to give the, give the importance that this is a global message coming from different parts of the world. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then now just briefly on the rapid response mechanism. So at CAN, we developed this mechanism to kind of generate quotes from across the network in a very rapid and timely fashion, so that we would actually have reactions to key political summits as statements were being delivered. So for instance, if there was a climate ambition summit, and we've seen many of these summits in the last few years, you will see that there is a line of political statements that are going to be made, and often it's quite hard to react to all of them in one go, or to make like one press release, based on so many different statements. So one way is to actually have a rapid response to maybe a political statement that is made. So for instance, if the minister from Brazil makes an announcement on the NDC, we would have a quote from our civil society members in Brazil reacting to that statement in real time, which we would then put on social media. And we would actually use that to also, put out a comprehensive press release, which would actually have quotes generated from across the network. So this is something that could work very well in an organization that has maybe people in different parts of the world, and you have, identified your messengers or the people who can be quoted, and that way, you have a rapid response in terms of, hitting the media on time and getting more input into media articles. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just a graphic representation of what I said. So it's obviously you have the statement by the heads of government. There is a tracking of how to respond to that. There is an evaluation of what ministers, what the statement actually means, whether it's a good NDC, whether it's a bad NDC, whether this is enough climate finance, committed by, say, the US or not. And then we would draft the message, create the formatting in social media cards, and obviously publish that. So we have many examples of this being done, and we would be happy to share that with our material after the training. So I think that is it from me. And sorry if it was a bit rushed, because we do want to get into the breakout groups, and I'll hand it back to Mickey to coordinate on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Darini. Before we head out to the breakout groups, let's open the floor for 1 or 2 questions. We have like a couple of minutes. If anyone has one, please unmute yourself or put it on the chat. Otherwise, we can go straight into the breakout session, because we do want to spend more time, having the interactive sessions than us just speaking the entire time. So if the breakout rooms are ready, we'll have about 30 minutes for the breakout rooms, just sensitive of time. We can do the Mentimeter later if we have more time after the after the session. Oh, sorry, Gray, you have your hand up.
Yes, you've provided an enormous amount of information. Is this going to be you've recorded it? Is it going to be available for looking at later?
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll email you a copy of the slide deck, and also we'll paste it on the we'll paste the link on the chat as well. And for social media, Ashwini's question, popular in which country? Yes, there are more data around social media and analytics per country, and they could be, there are ones in your regions and your countries. Of course, CAN covers quite, the whole world, but yeah, we can definitely look into that. Hootsuite provides really good reports per region and per country. So that's a tool we use. You can just go on their website and check out the reports as well. And they update that every quarter and every year. Fake news and how the big media houses are involved. Does anyone want to respond? Maybe Darini? For me, my experience is that some of the big media houses do a lot of fact checking, and they're a bit more proactive in fact checking as well. And they're, they have, associations or groups wherein they do fact checking all over social media, so that, and they also work with these social media platforms like Facebook to be, fact checkers of articles that are put out on Facebook or other social media platforms.
Yeah, just on that point, I mean, obviously there are mainstream media that are also, that do indulge in fake news because that is their editorial policy, and they aren't the best on like being objective or sticking to facts, and they editorialize to kind of speak to a certain group or constituency. And I think that's where some amount of media research needs to be done, because obviously you don't want to place an opinion piece or support a media that is known for maybe indulging in anti-science editorials or journalism. So yeah, I mean, we would also kind of vet and scrutinize different media to make sure that we are actually engaging with journalists who are true to their profession.
Excellent, thanks, Darini. There's also like a mapping of the different kinds of media houses we have, right? Like spanning from more left-leaning politics, media, and then right-leaning, because they, like Darini mentioned earlier, they all have like specific slants or angles that they want to promote and support. So proceeding to the interactive session, we'll have 30 minutes to do breakout groups. So in the main session, people from Canla, the Spanish-speaking ones, can remain. In the main session, in room 1, we've got Canla Portuguese, or everyone from the LAC region, Portuguese speaking, in room 1 with me. Room 2, everyone from Pacific, to be assisted by Maurice from World Future Council. Room 3, Kansa with Anna Abram, and room 4 with Kansia with Darini, and room 5, Africa and Arab World with Hala, and room 6 for Europe and Ika with Anna Scouron. For North America participants, you can join any of the following. I also see Masayoshi here from CAN Japan. You're also free to join any of the Asia Pacific groups, or even other regional groups if you want to join that. So please proceed to the rooms by clicking breakout rooms on the bottom of your Zoom, and you can go to the specific room that you are assigned to. And we'll have 30 minutes for the breakout group brainstorming. Those who will assist you will share this slide. And we have to assign or volunteer a facilitator, a note taker, and a presenter, and develop a very initial comms plan or toolkit for a regional political moment or regional campaign that you might have. This could be the UNFCCC Climate Weeks. It could be focused around the themes of renewable energy, ambition, NDCs, fossil fuels, climate finance. These are the 3 main guide questions. First one, who and where is your target audience, and when can you make that intervention for that target audience, right? Second is, what story or narrative would you like to tell, and what is your call to action? And the third box, how are you going to win the advocacy or the campaign, and what tools or channels will you use so that you can be effective? Like, how can you be effective? You can definitely use a Jamboard, which will be shared by those who will be with you, assisting during the training. So the Jamboard is basically a digital whiteboard that you can use. You can use sticky notes, add text and everything, and circle or add shapes and whatnot. And each of these pages represents each of your group. So please click the right button here if you're, say, going to group 2 or group 3, etc. And you can use the options on the left side of your screen to to use the the text or the sticky note feature, like so. All right, so we can all now go to the different. I think Maurice has started assigning people to different groups, and can facilitate those. We can facilitate amongst yourself the discussion, and we'll be back after 30 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. And I hope I was able to listen into at least 2 of the breakout sessions, as you know, with me barging in. I know that you would have needed more time, but we are very happy to just facilitate ongoing discussions afterwards if you are interested, so let us know. And because we only have like 20 minutes left, I would say I'll just go through the groups and maybe we can find a volunteer of each group who can just quickly summarize what the main findings are. So the idea was to start developing a very high-level communication strategy, a regional one. So who are the target audience, what is the narrative, and what is supposed to be the outcome, and how do we reach it? And the first group I have is the main session, so Latin America. Do we have a volunteer from there?
You can proceed to group 2, Pacific.
Okay.
Canada members joined the first session already.
Then Pacific. I know who was in the group, and I told you if nobody volunteers, I will volunteer somebody. So Gray, Otto, Masayoshi, do you have anybody of you volunteering? Catherine? No? Okay, then I will go with Maurice. So Maurice, I saw that you already wrote me anyway. Maybe can you quickly summarize what has been said about communication in the Pacifics? What kind of tools are predominant? What kind of channels are used quite frequently?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I just noted down that, for example, in the Fijis or in the island, or mostly in all of the regions, Facebook seems to be still the quite dominant social media after Twitter. So Facebook still seems to be a very, very important channel, as the most of the people are still using it and try to get their information from there. And then as a second channel, Twitter was mentioned to be quite dominant still, and further new tools or new social media channels like TikTok seem to be getting more and more important. So these are like the basic information I achieved from our call. But I don't want to steal the voice of all the participants. So please feel free to just jump in and add your ideas or opinions on that.
Okay, nobody see unmuting. Okay, but then I'll just quickly to add to that, in that groups, they also discussed that climate impacts are playing quite a huge role. So we had participants from Japan. Oh, no, I clicked something wrong. I don't think we had anybody from Australia though. So yeah, climate impacts and climate justice are quite important, but also for the whole Pacific regions, obviously loss and damage, but also coal export. As far as I'm aware, and again, please come in, but I don't think we really got to the who, where, and when though. No? No, then we'll leave it at that, I guess. Can we go to the next group? Thank you. Which is Can Southeast Asia or Can South Asia? Do we have a volunteer there?
Yeah, I'm speaking from Can South Asia. We didn't really get the time. We were trying to figure out how to kind of add our inputs on the Jamboard, so we don't have anything on there yet. But what we did discuss was when we narrowed down on what we want to talk about, which was particularly the recent landslides and flash flooding that have taken place in the Himalayas. which is relevant to both India as well as Nepal, which is the majority of the participants that we had in the group. So we kind of narrowed down on that. And the main audience that we wanted to address or target were the policymakers, but through a youth channel. So it was basically like a two-pronged target approach where we kind of communicated with the youth through platforms like Fridays for Future or Instagram or Facebook and other social media platforms. And then they could kind of come up with a more intergenerational dialogue as to what are their concerns and what are their inputs for the local policy makers. And a policy brief could be submitted to the local policy makers, and obviously get the local news channels involved, because that's what we've heard from people who've organized Fridays for Future in their respective cities. So yeah, that's what we've discussed in our breakout group. And if there are any other additions or if I've missed out anything, I would ask my group members to add to that. Thanks.
Classic, I was muted. Are there any additions from the group? I think that's quite interesting what you said, and especially climate-induced disasters like floods are so predominant globally. So I do think that this could be quite an interesting hook to not just get the regional government agencies and representatives hopefully finally acknowledging the seriousness of the issue, but also globally the people. For the sake of time, I would go to the next one. I think that's Ken Southeast Asia now. Yeah, and we have Nushrat, and I hope I pronounce your name correctly. If not, I'm sorry, who is presenting that one.
Hi, yes, it's perfectly fine. It's just I wanted to say I'm from Kansa, so it's Asia, not this one. So I got a bit confused. Should I go back?
I guess who was in the group with us? Sorry, I can't remember, but maybe someone from the group who was in this.
Hello?
Could it be that we have two Jamboards?
Can you hear me?
Anna, if we're doing Kansi, it's the next Jamboard. It's 5 of 17.
Okay, so
it's Nacha who's going to comment on the group.
Yeah, there was a bit of a confusion.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry.
No worries at all. So hi, I'm Nacha for Kansi. So our message was mostly on the theme of just transition in the context of COVID recovery, which is very relevant not only in Southeast Asia, but globally as countries scramble to right its economies and whatnot. So in doing so, the message centers around people who are impacted. So in our recovery, in our economic recoveries, are we taking into account the marginalized communities, impacted communities, as there are growing inequalities as we recover from the pandemic, and also including an intergenerational equity and youth perspective to this, as was mentioned earlier in the training, that youths play like a rising power and in this. And so our product, as Dari mentioned, is basically using social media as well as mainstream and traditional media in the form of op-eds and engaging with specialist editors, if I'm not mistaken, Niti, as well as political engagement. And how we intend to do this, there are several ways we can do it. So as I mentioned, op-eds, speaking to specialist journalists, and communicating in different languages. So as Dharani mentioned, we're hearing from different voices to give a more representative view, and getting stories directly from impacted communities so that they are able to shape the narrative. aside engagement with policymakers, also collaborating with local celebrities and influencers to get the message out, as they have a wider reach and a larger following, and also using social media to engage with the younger audience who are certainly more active by using TikToks, memes, in designing interesting graphics, for example, to get people's attention, as they are more likely to go viral. Yeah, that's about it. Nikki, please feel free to add, or Julian even.
Thank you so much, Nacha. And again, sorry for the confusion. Nikki, do you have anything to add?
I don't.
No, you don't. Then let me say this is quite sophisticated for that short amount of time, so very well done. Personally, just transition, I think, especially in the COVID context, this is also something I'm very much focusing on these days, and that you are trying to bring in local communities and give them, or empower them and give them a bigger or larger, more stronger voice. Now I got it. I think it's very, very important, and it sounds like the rapid response mechanism Darini mentioned earlier might be come in very well here as well. So the next group.
Sorry, the what mechanism, Anna? You said some mechanism Darini mentioned?
Yeah, the rapid response mechanism Darini mentioned, which is kind of entitled to get a lot of people doing the same thing and get their voice out, which might come in handy. At least it sounds like that to me. I don't know, Darini, do you want to come in very quickly on that?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed, I was in this group, and so yeah, people, the members from this region had suggested these points, but I do agree that yeah, maybe something, if there is like a political meeting or an event or something that requires immediate response, that could also be added to this mix. And yeah, and I thought the group brought in like really great ideas, so thanks everyone.
I completely agree. Okay, 9 more minutes to go. So room 5, Africa and Arab world. This would be the next one. I'm not completely sure who was in that group, so I have to ask if we have any volunteers.
Hi, Anna. Yeah, there was Wellington, Pato in the group, and we had Aisa, who was just...
so I will have my next. So I can travel.
Is there someone who needs to mute? So Pato, Wellington, would anyone like to volunteer? I'm not sure if they hear me.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can go. It makes me a little shy that I'm going after the previous group that just went, because we were quite stuck at the messaging, unfortunately, and almost all of our time we used trying to craft the messaging. And so it's not a full strategy, but I'll present it nonetheless. So the who, we were looking at COP, and the what, the two messages that we wanted to communicate was one, hold on. Okay, I think those two are mixed up, the how and the what. So the message that we wanted to communicate was to amplify voices of African grassroots, and secondly, push for accountability from developed countries for the commitments that they've already made, for the commitments and pledges that they've already made that they have not followed up on. And yeah, so on the amplifying African grassroots voices, would be doing that would consolidate the voices of African voices, and maybe under, yeah, and then maybe under the hat of Can Africa, then put pressure on them and encourage others and activists to put pressure. And yeah, so one of the issues that one of the more secondary issues wanted to address was the funding for alternative solutions in Africa. But that was about it. Unfortunately, we hadn't gotten to the actual social media strategy part. I think we maybe weren't keeping an eye on the clock, because even when we came back, I think someone was mid-sentence. So yeah, that was it from us.
Thank you so much, and no worries. I think you did quite well. We only had a very short amount of time. And again, this was only intended to kind of get the conversation going. And I think that spending a lot of time on the what and the narrative is actually definitely not the wrong way to go. Personally, I really like that you are trying to engage grassroots communities and grassroots organizations to really try to influence national and thereby also international climate change plans, and really try to raise ambition, and also actually how to finance that, which is a very real problem we are all facing. And given that we are closing very soon, I'm just going to the next group, and the last group, but not the least one, Europe and ICA. So I know that we worked on 2 Jamboards, but I think you kind of combined them now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's true. I can do it very quickly.
Thank you.
We spent more time on the practical, what and how, and not so much time on the narrative, which would be very interesting. Our topic is bees and pollutants, and we want to raise awareness over social media, combined with a call to action to sign a petition to prohibit these toxins in Europe. So we have 2 target groups. We have the European citizens above 18 who can sign the petition, and we have the politicians or the parliamentarians. Our messengers over Instagram or Twitter or Facebook can be influencers. We want to talk to beekeepers who are hands-on, and supportive parliamentarians and scientists. Our campaign can consist of informative videos or infographics, and it will be adapted to the platform we are using. So people on Facebook want it more simple and more entertaining. So we will go for that one. We added to collaborate with NGOs just to get as many people in as possible. And maybe someone wants to add something about our narrative. So I guess we would say pollutants are not necessary. People want it to stop. And bees are important. Let's protect them.
Perfect. Can I maybe add a little bit? We also discussed that through the, we discussed 2 options, and we stopped on this last one as presented perfectly, but we also were thinking like maybe the petition will be also about giving financial support to the beekeepers and to promote beekeeping, let's say, culture in society, to help already beekeepers who are already started beekeeping, or to help other people who financially who want to start beekeeping. So it's also like another option of it, just to mention that we also discussed that one. nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. So again, to just wrap that up, I think those were all really good discussions, and I think we can also see some overarching narratives for a global level, which we could use very well. And I really like that you are trying to really empower the people, trying to get the collective strength out there. And we are very happy to connect and facilitate. So if you want to just continue the discussions, please let us know, write to either one of the colleagues from CAN or also me at the WFC, and we are happy to connect you to the other participants. And to keep it very short, I'll just give over to Francois again. Francois, Are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Anna. So just to say thank you to everyone that joined and apologies for the technical glitches. As we mentioned, we will be putting the webinar up on the either this one or the previous one actually up on the CAN website, so you can always reflect back on that, and we will be sure to share all the different materials that we've shared here today as well with everyone via email. So we will be doing that. Doors always open. If anyone would like to follow up, certainly we can look at following up with you guys. As Anna said, we're at a huge thank you to, it wasn't applicable to this session, but to Christian Aid that helped us with the translations in the first session, which was absolutely phenomenal. So I just want to, even though we didn't use it in the session, just record our thanks and gratitude for helping us with the translations in the previous session as well. And that's it. So I'll hand over to Mickey. Mickey, I don't know if there's anything more from your side. We have the evaluation form, so maybe you can just help ask people to take us through that as well.
Great, thanks Francois, and thanks everyone to our partners at World Future Council, Bread for the World, and everyone from the different nodes and our members. I've pasted the link to the evaluation form on the chat, so we would really, really appreciate any feedback from you guys. It only takes a minute or two. It's a really short evaluation form, and that will really help us fine-tune and improve our trainings in the future. And we look forward to working with you all. And especially if you want to share these ideas, or if you want to continue working on the ideas that you've started here. The beekeeping idea was really interesting. Specifically, for example, you can share those in the CAN Comms call. You can engage with us, reach out to any of us in the CAN Comms team. There's me, Hala, Darini, and Francois. And again, thank you very much for joining this call. Then you can access the recording later on once we are able to upload it on the same event page, which is climatenetwork.org/comms training. And thank you, and good luck with your communications plans in your regions and countries. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Focus has to be is
bye. Thank you very much.
Whose social network is
goodbye all.
Whose social capital in terms of that is big, where they're in